name's Allison. And if anyone is into Zoom and you want to change your view, if you look up in the top right-hand corner, there's a thing that says view, so you can go back and forth between the person who's speaking being big on the screen or the mass of little boxes. So I like the little squares because I don't like to look at myself in the large format. The lower bar shows the main on-off options for the mic and the camera and the chat box. So I would like you all to turn on your chat box, open up the chat box, and I would like you all to mute your microphones. We want to hear your thoughts and questions, so we're going to use the chat box for that. There's too many of us to have an open discussion. So we'll all type our thoughts in the chat box, and then the speakers will turn their mics on when they are speaking. Okay? And many of us who live out in the rural areas have poor internet. So if you find your internet connection is not good, you don't have enough bandwidth, the best thing to do is to turn your camera off, and then you can still hear things. And
recording in progress.
We just won't be able to see you. But it's nice to be able to see you, so if you have enough bandwidth, please keep it on. And finally, we're recording the meeting so that it's an easier way for us to take minutes than to sit here and try and write everything down. So we're going to use it for that. And then if people who can't make the meeting request a copy of the recording, we'll be providing it to them. So it is going to be publicly available. So
good. Some of your face.
So could everyone mute, please? And I put in the chat box that if you have technical issues, please call Jill. She's got her phone right by her side and she's willing to help. Okay. So are we ready to get started? Officially? Is Larry here?
I don't think that Larry's here yet.
Okay, we can't start officially then.
Can you send him a text maybe if he's not here? I don't see him.
Larry's here. He's trying to get a word in edgewise.
I think Larry's here.
Excellent.
Yep.
He is? Okay, great. Then we're going to start. So we are here on the unceded traditional territory of the Cowichan people, and Larry George is kindly providing a welcome tonight. Larry.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I can. You're great.
Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Itapo Elliot Siamnesia. Itapka. Meet Nuwalam Cowichan Tomo. Hello, everyone. My name is Larry George. I am the director for Lalamakan, which is the Land and Governance Department at Cowichan Tribes. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Koksilah River Flows meeting tonight. I'd like to thank all of the organizers for this event. Definitely appreciate your participation. Look forward to your questions and discussions. And thanking all the ones that will be making presentations tonight. And we would have been nice to, be on our lands to have this discussion, but hopefully that will be happening soon. So on behalf of Cowichan Tribes, extend the warmest welcome to each of you and look forward to meeting you all in person in the very near future. Tepka. Thank you very much, Alison. Appreciate your team for the organization for having us get together tonight.
Yeah, hi, Larry. I Kwанasi Lamnala. It is so good to see all of us together here. My name is Allison Nicholson, and the Koksilah Watershed is where I live. And I'm sitting actually in the watershed at the hub where I have a fast internet to participate. But I probably know quite a few of you, but if you don't know me, I wear several community hats. I'm an elected director for this area on the CVRD board. I'm also a member of the Cowichan Watershed Board, and I work with the Koksilah Watershed Working Group, who are a community group focused on learning and caring for the watershed. which we don't think is in the best of health. I am here on behalf of the Cowichan Watershed Board, and I'm really pleased to be co-chairing tonight. I'm co-chairing with Kelly Melnechenko from the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations. Cali and I are two of a larger group of people who have been working behind the scenes on drought issues in the Koksilah. And the group includes the Dairy Association, the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmland Advantage, the Koksilah Working Group, the Cowichan Watershed Board, the Estuary Nature Center, Mosaic, and of course the water folks from FLNRORD, Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations. So we actually come from different places and organizations, but we have, and with that said, we have quite different roles and mandates sometimes. But I would say that the group shares a real common concern for the health of the community and the watershed, and a real focus on helping the community join in with us to address our water issues. And I was reflecting on our meeting. We held a similar meeting last year in June, and I reported at that time feeling very grateful for the moist lushness of the watershed at that time. And that's such a contrast to this year. Honestly, I have to say I'm really spooked by feeling like it's September in July. It's very dry. It's a nerve-wracking to think that we may run out of water completely, and nerve-wracking to worry about wildfires. So we all need to pay attention. And what's interesting is the Koksilah is not alone. Many watersheds in southeastern Vancouver Island are now regularly facing serious water concerns. But what sets us apart is that we've been working on watershed issues on the Cowichan and the Koksilah now for several years, and we're leading the way. And I think that has fantastic benefits that we really should appreciate. For example, we now have the attention of the province. They are definitely paying attention to us and to particularly to the Koksilah. We're also seeing resources flowing to our watershed to do the work that will help us figure out how we can move forward in a much more sustainable way. And, you know, there are many questions to answer if we're to understand our watershed and move forward successfully. And many of you asked those questions last year. So tonight we felt the purpose of the meeting should really be to focus on updating you on the great work that started to answer those questions. We haven't got all the answers in place, but we've got a lot of projects underway and we've made progress. And we will also admit that there are still gaps, important gaps. One of the gaps that we see is understanding the impacts of forestry on the watershed and its hydrology. We aren't going to try and address that topic at this meeting, but we hope to host a meeting dedicated to that topic. So stay tuned for that. So basically the purpose of the meeting is to update you on the work that's underway. And of course, the purpose is also to strengthen our connections with one another and the watershed. So it's good to keep cameras on so we can connect. The format for the evening is very simple: a series of short updates by some key people, followed by a question and answer period. Please jot your questions down as they occur to you in the chat box. And we've got people, part of our team, busy behind the scenes, loading them into a spreadsheet so that Callie and I at the end can ask the questions of the appropriate people in sort of thematic groups. That's the idea anyway. So now I'm going to turn to Kelly and let her introduce herself, and she's going to do an agenda review. Kelly.
Thank you, Allison. Hi, everyone. My name is Cali Melnechenko, and I work with the Water Authorizations team out of the West Coast region with the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations, and Rural Development. I think I've seen many of your faces before, but it's lovely to see so many people willing to join us virtually on such a hot, sunny evening. I know a lot of you would probably prefer to be out swimming. But I think this is an issue that is important to many people, and a watershed that everybody cares a lot about. And although our region is, the people that work in our region are responsible for many watersheds, we spend maybe a disproportionate amount of time and effort in but I think it's really we're starting to make some progress, and there's been a lot done over the last year. And unfortunately, we only have about 8 minutes for each presenter, but we get to learn a bit more about what's been happening since we last met a year ago. So we've got 5 different agenda items or topics to go over tonight. So we'll start with an update on the water sustainability planning scoping project, and then we'll move to the fish flows twinned watershed study, and then the Koksilah connections hydrology study, and then an update on flows and monitoring done by our ministry. And then at the end, we'll move to an agriculture update from David Tatum and from Land Advantage. So to start, I'd like to welcome Pat Lapcevic from the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations, and Larry George from Cowichan Tribes.
Thank you, Callie. Thank you, everyone. It was great to see so many people in attendance. It is really encouraging to see that many people have the Koksilah watershed system on their minds and are looking for ways to support the system. So with that, there is some ongoing work that is being conducted jointly with Cowichan Tribes and the Ministry of FLNRORD, and that has been ongoing since March of 2020. It has been a very good relationship, and it continues to grow stronger as time goes on. We are meeting on a regular basis, and we are looking at scoping on how to get a status of what the Koksilah watershed's condition is, and with that, we plan to use that information to bring that hopefully to the next stage of planning, so that we can look at what the next steps are going to be. So we do have support from each of our leaderships to be in this process. The Koksilah watershed system is very important to many people in this region for various reasons, and we want to get an idea of what those reasons are and how we can look at supporting all of those groups that are in need of this environment. We are, I think, all have the same goal. We want to save the water. It is a valuable resource. It provides so many benefits to each of us as a community, as a family, and as individuals. And we want to be able to sustain that wonderful gift for the future members of each of our families. As we all know, water is a non-renewable resource, and it is going to take us to ensure that the sustainability is kept up and monitored and maybe enforced as time goes on. We are seeing there's many complex reasons that have put the watershed in this situation. Trying to understand what those are and how they can be addressed is going to take time and energy, and that's what the scoping project is, to try to determine those steps. But we know there's definitely not one answer that's going to solve this problem. It's going to be a combination of things that a whole number of groups are going to need to do to make it work. This current year, we've been successful in achieving funds from the Healthy Water Initiative. That funding will bring us to December 2021. So we'll be doing the scoping and looking at the early stages of planning with that funds. One of the main components we're looking to do is to support the development of a memorandum of understanding and looking at determining the responsible entity or entities that are going to take the lead on this process. We do have, staff dedicated from Cowichan tribes and from the FLNRORD ministry. That is, a great step that's been taken by our leaderships. We definitely want to continue moving on that. It's a great opportunity because many individuals with a lot of knowledge and expertise have been able to come to the table to support this process. And that's one of the main reasons we've gotten so far. And the relationship is one of the main reasons we're still at the table and continue to get support from each of our leaderships. Maybe I will turn to Pat and have her say a few words. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, well, thank you, Larry. I don't have much to add. I think you summarized a lot of what we've been doing for the past year. Cali has just put in the chat box the website. So Larry mentions, there have been some projects that working groups have done to really start to look at what are some of the gaps in our understanding. We know that, and the reports are available, and there should shortly be a update on where we're at in sort of this after this past year. And I think as Larry mentioned, the problem's complex, and we know the solutions are complex. And we're looking forward to the next number of years to try and work towards a sustainable solution that allows the users, and not just the human users, but also the aquatic habitats that depend on this water, a healthy future. And I think that's what it's all about, is looking to the future and how can we do our best and work towards a sustainable watershed. And I think I'll leave it there. And I know there'll be an opportunity for questions later. So I think that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up we have Tom, who is with the Cowichan Watershed Board, real force behind the Watershed Board, along with Jill Thompson. Actually, they do an amazing job. And he's going to talk to us about things that they have underway with other organizations involved too. Tom.
Thank you very much, Allison. And I'm going to turn my camera off because I'm speaking to you from the top of Mountain Road, and our internet connection here is not very good. So I think it's actually better with my camera off. So I'm just wondering if someone can confirm that they can see a slide deck in front of them.
Tom, we can see it. It would be good if you
Pat,
could.
I can see you. Pardon me?
Can you put it on full screen?
It's on full screen on my computer.
Okay. There we go.
So just to start off, so I've been asked to talk about some of the work that's going on in the river now. And I think in the agenda, it's called research or science or biology. And I've often thought that those things are just really about answering questions we have. And Allison led off by saying that all of us who are speaking, or many of us, are going to try and address some questions that we heard last year. And so I think the work that we are doing is trying to answer some of the important questions that people have. And so I've got 8 minutes, so I've decided to concentrate on 2. So the first question that I heard is, you know, we've been told we need to conserve water to benefit salmon stocks. So I haven't seen a whole lot of salmon in the Koksilah. How many are there? Like, are they all gone? Is it worth the effort? So I think that's a pretty basic question. And then the second question that we're trying to answer is, we've also been told that these low water levels are hard on salmon. So how does that work? And how low do the levels have to be before they're a problem? So those are 2 pretty basic questions. And I'm just going to speak briefly on some of the work we're doing that's going to attempt to answer them. So we have historic salmon population abundance records for the Koksilah. So in the last century, from about the 1960s to the 1990s, like DFO did a pretty good job of enumerating salmon. They had charter patrolmen and they had guardians and they had stock assessment people like doing estimates of populations. And if you look at those records, the chum salmon were in the tens of thousands. The coho would be in the hundreds to thousands range, and hundreds about 20 years ago. So no population abundance estimates have been generated by government agencies for salmon this century. So if you were to ask me, well, exactly how many salmon do we have? So we're working to try and fix that. So Cowichan Tribes has received a grant from the BC Salmon Restoration Innovation Fund to find out how many salmon we have. So quickly, some of that program will involve installing a DIDSON, which is a sonar fish counter. So you see, hopefully you can see the picture on the upper left, those ghost fish. That's the image that a DIDSON provides us. So if the water is high or low or flooding, it doesn't matter. We still get an accurate count. The problem is it's hard to tell a chum ghost fish from a coho ghost fish. So what we're also doing is installing a camera array, which we can use to develop a species composition. So how many fish of each? So we'll get a good count of the number of salmon swimming up the river. We'll also look at the small salmon, the baby salmon swimming out of the river through the use of a rotary screw trap. And you'll see Cherriers on one in the lower picture. That was in the Chemainus this for the 3 years, at least, all this equipment. So DIDSON is well over $100,000. The rotary screw trap is made of aluminum, so it might as well be made of gold these days. That's probably a $30,000 unit. So we will have this equipment and we will keep it in our community. And the other thing we're doing is using local biologists, Sherry Ayers, Dr. Melissa Evans, and local crew to run these things. So we're not only getting the information, we're building the capacity in our community, like both through human capacity and equipment, so that we as a community can do this work moving forward. So we won't be relying on outside agencies to help us. We'll have the capacity to like ourselves. So that was the first question. The second question is, well, how much water do we need in the summer when it's low? So the Watershed Board has received a grant from the Conservation Economic Stimulus Initiative. So thanks to the province to actually do the science to find out. So this spring, we had crews surveying 17 representative transects in the Koksilah, 12 on the Chemainus, and we're sampling these habitat transects repeatedly as the flows drop. So each transect is being carefully sampled 6 times, approximately 30% mean annual discharge. So the flow in the river was about 3 cubic meters per second, right down to last week when we're just over 2%. So that would be 0.2 CMS. And as the water drops, we're able to quantify the differences in the habitat available, in the critical habitats available, like in pools, riffles, glides, and then these differences will be modeled, and we can come up with a recommended environmental flow. So this work is, in fact, cutting edge science. We have Jeff Anderson, a hydrologist, working with us, and he has Dr. Ian Jowett, who is the author of the SEPA model and basically the environmental flows guidance actually in the world working on this. And so we will be able to really answer the question accurately. Well, what do these low flows mean to the available fish habitat? And again, the field work is being done by local people. So we're building capacity in our community. So to wrap up, over the next few years, we will be able to accurately and confidently, not confidentially, answer the questions. How many salmon live in the Koksilah watershed? We'll know. And how much water do they need to thrive and survive? We'll know that as well. And perhaps most importantly, that knowledge is being generated by the people that live in the watershed. So we're building long-term capacity in the Cowichan community and in the general community as well. So we can become better placed as a community to actually steward our watershed. So I'd like to thank you. I rushed through that, but 8 minutes is not a long time. So thank you very much. There is another research project going on that's looking at groundwater, surface water connectivity. And I believe that Christine Disney is here to speak to that. So with that, thank you again, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Tom. Over to you, Christina. Are you there? I've been looking through the list for Christina. Didn't see her. Is she actually here or not? Oh dear, maybe she forgot. Tom, do you want to pitch it? You know about the study. I could do a little bit. The Koksilah Connections is a study being done by UVic, and Christina Disney is a graduate student who is leading it with Tom Gleason, who is the professor who's in charge. And the idea is to try and better understand the connectivity between the surface and the groundwater. And so this summer, Tom Gleason has applied for an NSERC grant. He doesn't know yet if he's going to get it. He's very optimistic that it'll come through. So they've started this summer in sort of a trial basis, and they have a number of us citizen scientists out monitoring weekly from now through September, the tributaries just at various sites before in the lower watershed before they enter the Koksilah, doing temperature and conductivity and stuff like that. And the idea is with this data, they'll be able to determine how the groundwater and the surface water are connected. And Tom, you probably know more technical stuff you could add.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I think you've done a pretty good job of summing it up. I think, you know, 2 things that are worth mentioning is, again, the research is being guided by a world-class scientist, and the research is being done by the people who live in the valley. And again, I really emphasize the value of that. And I know some of you are on the call today. And secondly, this, as someone that's not a subject matter expert, I'm not a hydrologist, and it seems like black magic to me, but the connection between surface water and groundwater, which we're learning about here, I think is going to be really important to us as we move forward with respect to managing the aquifer, managing the river, and learning about the relationship the two have with each other. Because I think that's going to be key for us making good decisions moving forward. And the fact that we have someone like Dr. Tom Gleason, who is interested in our watershed and really helping us with this work, and recruiting a fair amount of money to do it, I think is super helpful for all of us moving forward.
And I would add that he anticipates, once they work all the bugs out and he gets his funding, that this will carry on for a couple of years. So we will be looking for more volunteers to help. And I must say, it's a really great way to get to know your watershed and to get to know other community members. So keep that in mind as a project to do next summer. Over to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Allison and Tom, for filling in for Christine. Too bad we didn't get to hear from her. But up next, we have Ben Robinson, who will give us an update on the flows in the river this year and the monitoring work that our ministry has been doing.
Thanks. Hey, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good stuff. So I'm Ben Robinson. I'm an assistant water manager. I work with Cali and Nanaimo in the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. And we work in the water authorizations section, dealing with licensing and managing river flows during low flow periods. Today I'm going to present on stream flows, the water management efforts to date, and the licensing of groundwater. Let's see if we can go next screen. There we go. So here's just a quick map showing you the locations of all of our stream flow monitoring gear in Koksilah right now. So there are these purple triangles are the stations that our team manage. So we have an active network consisting of an upper gauge in Kingburn Park. Can you see my mouse if I move it on the screen? I don't know if you can see the mouse.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so there's an upper gauge in Kingburn Park, which is kind of like an upper, capturing the river flows before. There's like an upper envelope, let's say, and then all the flow is, most of the flow is kind of being captured and used by human use between this station here in Kingburn Park and a lower station down here at the railway trestle near the highway. So these two are kind of an envelope around the bulk of the use. And then we have a flume on Petrolas Creek, which is capturing very low flows, as well as another flume on Glenora Creek, which is currently installed. The Petrolas Flume Creek should be going in tomorrow. And these capture the really low flows during the lowest time of flow in the year. And this kind of gives us a sense of how much water is flowing from these tributaries into the main stem. And in the middle here, we have this orange square. That's the federal Water Survey of Canada, Ministry of Environment, Climate Change Canada station that's been on the system for well over 100 years now, collecting data throughout the year, both summer and winter. So just to contrast that, our flows have only been collected for maybe 2+ years at these stations. That's about it, so pretty young data. From a regulatory standpoint, we use this gauge here at the lower point. So whatever flows are there is what we manage to. And this is just a quick snapshot of the Water Survey of Canada gauge. If there's any issues with this data, I'd have to defer to the federal government for that. But I just wanted to show you what things have looked like since 1st of June. So on the left axis, we have water temperature. On the right axis, we have estimated flow. And what we do with these curves is we measure the stream flow with instrumentation. And then we have a sensor in the stream that's always there measuring water depth. And then we can generate a curve that estimates water flow or river flow based on the depth of water. And these red dots here denote flow measurements, actual flow measurements in the stream. As you can see here, from 1st of June, we've had a couple spikes with small rainfall events and a really quite rapid decline in river flows, which is quite normal. We're down at, this was snapshot yesterday, but just check this gauge, we're about 220 liters per second, or 0.22 cubic meters per second. So you can imagine 220 1 liter water bottles flowing by at any 1 second in the stream. That's the estimate, with the measurement on Monday being 233 liters per second. And it's fairly low for the time of year. It's in the 11th percentile, so we're certainly lower than normal. And then another very interesting, somewhat concerning measurement is this temperature in the green line. So you can see in early June, we were around 14 to 18 degrees Celsius. It even cooled down, and then when the heat wave came, we went way up to 25, 26 degrees Celsius, and it dropped a little bit, but it's hovering around the 20 to 22. And just to note, this is not saying that the entire stream is that temperature. This is just the temperature of the water measured at that point, at that sensor. It's likely that fish, hopefully, were seeking refuge in cool areas of the stream where there's groundwater inflows, but it definitely points to a warm stream, which is not great for fish health. This data can be accessed online to the Environment Canada website. And this is the same thing, basically, same deal here. This is from our lower trestle station now. This is managed by our group in Ministry of Forest and Lands and Natural Resource Operations. And these green dots here, you can see we're actually measuring stream flows a lot more frequently. We're going there twice a week right now. And you can see that this blue line, which is an estimation again of river flow down at the trestle, is falling nicely between these green dots, which are actual stream flow measurements. Sometimes we have to correct if the curve is shifted a little bit. If flow is a little higher or lower than the actual curve is telling us, maybe by 5% or more, we'll correct this curve. So it will shift up and down a little bit, but generally it's a very good estimate of flows. And this is all real-time data sent every few minutes by our cell service. On Monday, it was 254 liters a second, and as of this evening, this estimated flow is about 220 liters per second, so it's declining still. Okay, so that's the flows. That's what they look like. They've been declining, and will continue to decline as well, especially given that it is only end of July, unless we get a rainfall event or two, some serious ones. The water management efforts, these have been touched on already by Alison briefly at the beginning, and this is aside from all the work that's going on with Cowichan tribes and our ministry with respect to the water sustainability scoping process. This is kind of more annual water management efforts, but recognizing that FLNRORD, the best way we could help manage water more effectively in the watershed is to involve local stakeholders and rights holders. So we started with the help of Cowichan Watershed Board, this Koksilah River working group last year, and Alison mentioned all of the different partners that are on in that group. But there's about 20 people now representing non-government, government, both federal and provincial and local government, agriculture, and forestry. So we come together every week, every other week, I should say. We look at stream flows like we just did, and then we talk about what's coming, whether we need to reach out to the community, let people know where things are at, and maybe request reduction. So, for example, the 2 letters, if you received the 2 letters as a resident in the watershed from our ministry, these were sent through this working group. And there's also a voluntary irrigation schedule that's going to be triggered at 200 liters per second at our lower gauge, and so I'm assuming that's the next couple of days. And that is there'll be more talked about here, but it's 19 large irrigators that have committed to voluntary reducing their irrigation by 50%, which is a huge cut and sacrifice that they're making to try and keep stream flows up above the critical threshold that we have of 180 liters per second. And if things aren't successful and flows continue to decline, then we'll have to consider again restricting or curtailing water use like we did in 2019. That's an absolute last resort, and we hope that these additional efforts before we'll hold things off until we get some rain. But a big thank you to everybody who is taking part in making sacrifices and reductions. And if you haven't made any cutbacks yet, I urge you please to consider how you're using water and where you might be able to cut back, because it is all additive, whether it's surface water or groundwater from a well. We understand that the aquifers are all hydraulically connected to the streams, so they do influence each other. Finally, on licensing, I'm probably running out of time here, but so if you're an existing user of groundwater, that means if you were using groundwater before February 29th of 2016 for a non-domestic use, so on a farm, for irrigation, for livestock, for commercial purposes, that means you're an existing user and you had common law rights before the Water Sustainability Act came in 2016. And the whole point of this transition period is to bring those common law rights into the framework of the Water Sustainability Act. But you have a deadline to apply for those. There's a line in the stand, and that's March 1st, 2022. So I urge everyone and anyone, if you have been using groundwater for non-domestic purposes and you haven't applied yet and been thinking about it, please do get that application in, because once that's in, it then cements those rights in place until you get a license and brought into the fold of the Water Sustainability Act. We have about 65 applications in right now. We know that there's many more that should flow in. The big risk here is that if you don't, as an existing user, if you don't apply by that deadline, you'll be treated as a new user. So that means you have to have a license in hand before you can divert and use that water. But considering the fact that there is no available water in Koksilah River or its tributaries in the summer months, and that we know groundwater is connected to surface water and the use of groundwater influences the river flow, it's very unlikely that any new rights are going to be diverted should it be deemed to be impacting river flows in summer. So that means if you're an existing user and you don't apply before March 1st, 2022, you may very well lose those rights and not get them back again. So it's a pretty serious implication to your livelihood and your business if you don't make that application. And lastly, if you have a domestic well, that's for non-commercial stuff for water use in your house and a small garden, I encourage everyone to register your well. And this is different. These two terms often get conflated and confused. Registering is not licensing. Registering is just going to create a well record in the provincial database, and we can see where all these wells are. And when we receive license applications, we can consider that use for that from that domestic well and protect those rights. We just know it exists. It's very helpful to know. And as well, if there's a well record, we can get data on what the lithology looks like, which helps us understand the aquifers in the area, etc. So if you have any questions about applying for an existing use license or a new use license, or registering your domestic well, you can contact Front Counter BC, and there's the number on the screen there. That's the Nanaimo office, so that's the local office, should you have any questions. That's it from me. I think my 8 minutes is probably long gone. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can figure that out. And apologies if you have phoned me recently and I haven't answered your call. It's very busy times, and I will get to you soon.
Thanks, Ben.
Stop sharing.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, we meet every 2 weeks, and Ben always gives us a very technical update on the flow situation. And it's quite a challenge it's a very sophisticated process, and it's quite a challenge to make sure all the sensors are working and the models all kept up to date and accurate. So they really do spend a lot of time on that, and we really appreciate that. Okay, then the last people we have, and we're doing really well for time because we missed a speaker. So the last people we have are the agriculture folks, and we have Dave Tatum and Ione Smith from Farmland Advantage. So take it away.
Great, thanks very much. I'm just gonna put this into presenter view. Here we go. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, except it's not really presenter view.
Oh, it's the other presenter view, isn't it? Okay, hold on one sec. Slideshow is what I need. Okay, that must be better.
Great.
So thank you, Allison. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Ione Smith, and I'm actually speaking to you from Koksilah Nation territory in Sechelt on the Sunshine Coast, so just across Georgia Strait from most of you. And I do also have Dave Zender with me from Farmland Advantage. I saw he was in the audience, and I'll just refer to him a little bit, introduce him in a minute as well. And yes, Dave Tatum, who's been helping us with this program. So what I'm going to do is just provide a little bit of the background of Farmland Advantage, and then discuss how we came to be, what the Provincial Steering Committee has been up to, and then really focus on what some of our objectives are within Koksilah, and some of the progress so far and where we're getting our funding from, because I know that might be a question that some people have. So first of all, Farmland Advantage is a payment for ecosystem services program that contracts farmers to protect and enhance the environment in which they operate. It was developed by Dave Zender, who is a rancher from the East Kootenays near Invermere, and I mentioned he's also here this evening too. And so it was really a farmer-developed, farmer-focused program to look at ways in which we can celebrate and compensate producers for all the important work that they do around stewardship of farmland in British Columbia. It takes a farm-based approach, but also looks at the region. And so it's very targeted around specifically ecosystems that are high value in terms of either species at risk or ecosystem riparian habitat, grassland habitat, and so on and so forth. And it's quite complementary to another program which a lot of people might be familiar with, which is the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries Environmental Farm Plan, ARDCorp's program around the support for best management, beneficial management practices around the province. It's different from the EFP program because in the EFP program, there's funding available and farmers approach the funding platform and apply for it. This one is the reverse. So we pre-identify watersheds and ecosystems that we would like to target for conservation and for stewardship and for compensation to farmers, and we approach farmers. So it's a little bit turned around that way. The financial incentives are fairly modest. It's not supposed to really replace the amount of financial hardship that sometimes farmers must endure due to some of the sacrifices they have to make, but it's a way of at least acknowledging that there is sacrifices being made and helping to bring those farmers to the table and really elevate the agricultural sector as a stakeholder and ensure that they're being recognized for all the hard work that they're doing. So I mentioned Dave Zender. He was really instrumental in pulling together a pilot program, and it was a multi-year pilot program over different regions of the province, the Kootenays, the Cariboo, South Okanagan, Lower Mainland primarily. It was very successful. Pretty much every single farmer that was approached was interested in participating. Based on that success, there was some secured written support from Minister Popham, the Minister of Agriculture, for the program, as well as some in-kind support provided by the ministry in order to launch this program on a more provincial level. And so the program was brought under the auspices of Investment Agriculture Foundation of BC, or IFBC, earlier in 2021, with the idea of really launching it into a provincial program. And so there's a real objective to make it grow year upon year and really amplify the different regions within the province that are being represented through the project. Right now, we have secured funding from the Healthy Watersheds Initiative, as well as Environment and Climate Change Canada, that's ECCC, for species at risk in grasslands, primarily in the interior. And so our funding is for the 2021 and 2022 fiscal years. We have a provincial steering committee that is helping us ensure that we are on target in terms of our methodology, so that we have some robust scientific background for making sure that we're targeting the sites in an appropriate way. And we also have all these representatives who are able to make sure that we're doing things in a way that are scientifically valid, but also measurable, and we're able to monitor and audit the program as we move forward. And it's just great to have this level of expertise at the table. In terms of our objectives for this year, we're looking at 4 regions of focus. So we're looking at the Upper Columbia portion of the Kootenays. We're looking at Bertrand Creek in Langley, Little Campbell River in Surrey, and the Koksilah Watershed here on Vancouver Island. We have a target of total of 50 sites. Most of them have already been pre-identified. That's 50 sites for the whole province. Within the Koksilah, it's about 15 to 20 sites. And it's really important to us that we partner with local Indigenous groups. So obviously in the Koksilah, that's primarily the Cowichan tribe. So we've been working from day one on partnering with them to ensure that their expertise and knowledge is brought to the table. I noticed in the chat there were some questions around that. And yes, that's really a key objective, not only of Farmland Advantage, but also of our funders as well. So it's really important priority for us. In the Koksilah, I mentioned there's some parallels here with the environmental farm plan work that happened historically in the last few years. So we're building on some of that work, and that involves working with Dave Tatum. It's been great to have his local expertise that we can rely on in terms of outreach. We are definitely hoping to support as many farmers as possible with this compensation. That involves the irrigation scheduling work. So we're targeting 18 to 20 farms there. And so far, we've been really successful. We've had 19 farms indicate interest, and 7 farms provide their contact information so that we can have some contracts signed for them for their compensation already. And we're just at the start, so that's great. And then we're also going to be supporting some riparian health restoration work. We anticipate 6 to 8 of those irrigation scheduling sites will also have riparian ecosystem running through their properties that would qualify to be eligible for this additional level of work. So just in terms of a timeline, we're sort of here in that blue area, the summer. I mentioned we've got about 19 farms that are interested so far in being compensated for irrigation scheduling, and 7 that have provided us with their contact information. The fall is when a lot of the restoration work for that riparian area would be happening, and we'll be issuing payments to farmers as soon as possible. We are hoping to wrap up everything by the end of December in order to align with the Healthy Watersheds Initiative funding. Our Species at Risk Partners for Agricultural Landscapes, that's the SARPAL funding, that's primarily directed towards the grassland. So that's extended for another 2 years, but we are really, really hopeful that we will be successful with this Agricultural Climate Solutions funding application that Investment Agriculture Foundation has put together. And if so, that would provide us with much longer term funding. And so that would allow us to leverage and amplify the work that we're doing as a baseline right now, and hope to grow the program into the future. We're always looking for additional local partnerships. That's why we contacted the Koksilah Drought Working Group to begin with, and I've been so thankful and just lots of gratitude for how welcoming they've been to bring us to the table to their meetings. And we're greatly happy, we're very happy to be here tonight. So I'm happy to be around and answer any questions that anyone might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ione. And Dave, are you here? We're so lucky to have Dave Tatum, a community member who knows all the farmers and really is a real asset. So thank you, Dave and Ione.
Sorry, Allison. I think Doug Pepper's going to introduce Dave Tatum.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's okay. I am Doug Pepper, the regional agrologist with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. And as Ben mentioned and Ione just mentioned, along with Dave Tatum, we've been helping coordinate the irrigation schedule again this year. That was done last year as well. And that's a project that we hope that's not going to repeat every year because it's not the complete answer, but a number of producers have volunteered to participate in the schedule. And as Ben mentioned, it's going to happen fairly soon, I guess. Once we reach 200 liters per second, 2 groups will alternate their irrigation, and hopefully that'll slow the decline of the river, and we won't have to get to a shutdown like we had a couple years ago. Anyways, I'll let Dave jump in and add any details that he has to that, but he's been doing an outstanding job giving updates every week and trying to keep everybody up to date what's going on. And we very much appreciate all the producers that are participating in this, because like Ben said, it's a big deal. It's a lot of revenue lost.
Yeah, I don't really have too much more to add to that, but yes, 19 farmers, the group that we had last year, I think plus 1 more, have volunteered to take part in the irrigation scheduling, and basically, as Ben Robinson mentioned, it will be. I would be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we're into scheduling by the end of this week or early next week. Myself, I watch that gauge I look it up every day to see where the levels are every morning. So I know I'm waiting for 200 liters per second to show up. So I know we're heading into scheduling. So the farmers did it last year, just for some of you who weren't aware of it. They scheduled last year, which was mentioned. And the reason that we started doing that last year was to resist having to go into the complete shutdown that we did in 2019, where we had to stop irrigating because of the low flows. So last year we were lucky that the weather cooperated in 2020, and we basically only had to go into scheduling for 8 days. This year, I said, based on the long range forecast, I said, I suspect it'll be a lot longer. And hopefully we can maintain the flows at 180 liters per second, so that we can maintain irrigation at halftime. So just for your knowledge, the schedule works on a 4-day basis. So I have the farmers divided into 2 groups. So one group irrigates for 4 days, and then they shut their irrigation off, and the other group irrigates for 4 days. So this year we'll be starting with group B, because they started second last year, just so they get a first shot at it. But yeah, so to the farmers, it takes a fairly big hit, but I think for them, it's having some water versus no water is still a benefit. I know this year my crop numbers are going to certainly be down without the irrigation that I would normally have. So we look forward to some resolve in the future, and we haven't, as mentioned, we haven't come up with any hard facts or where we're headed or how we're planning to resolve that. And the agriculture industry is wondering themselves, if this is our sort of new norm, what are we going to be doing in the future to maintain enough water for irrigation? Anyway, I leave that with you. One other thing, I'll make one comment. I know I think it was in 2019, one of the farms had somebody who saw him irrigating during the shutdown and damaged his irrigation pump. If some farmers are allowed to do that, if they're strictly pumping from storage, in other words, if they've stored water in a pond or a dugout or whatever, and are not pumping from either their wells or their or the river or their streams, then they can pump that water from storage and continue irrigating throughout the shutdown. Anyway, I leave that with you. If you have any questions, you can put them on the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, that's a good point, and that leads me maybe to the first question. What can neighbors do when they observe another water user using more water than seems necessary, and that it's impacting a shared confined aquifer? We've already tried speaking to the water user after observing open pools of water in their field. Other neighbors are monitoring their wells and watching them drop while they use water. What are we to do? Can we report them? Cali,
Is that being directed at me, Allison? I think there's a number of factors there, and there would be more questions, some more clarity needed on what direction may need to be taken. But if it is a compliance and enforcement matter, if the person is using more water than they are authorized to use, or it is believed that there is been a contravention in any way, then it can be reported to the RAP line, which is just online, the Natural Resources Offense, I think it's called, Ben.
There's RAP and there's a natural resource online violation reporting tool. It's easier just to call the RAP line, I think.
Yeah. So that would get directed through our compliance and enforcement committee, and likely to the group that Ben and I work with to investigate. If they are a licensed user and using with the volume that is permitted within their license, then there may not be much that can be done at this time unless there is an order in place that would prohibit the use of water under that water license. If it's somebody that is not licensed and using water for non-domestic purposes, then there's potential to order them to cease using water. Or if they're using more than the licensed volume, then they could be ordered to reduce down to their licensed volume as well. But we're hoping with the requests for voluntary reduction and communicating with the community that people will all do their part to protect this watershed and kind of share the pain in this very dry summer.
Thanks, Kelly. Ione, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that to reiterate what Dave Tata mentioned is that there was quite a lot of farms I know that are working on water storage. It's becoming more and more apparent that likely site by site, farm by farm sites storage like water ponds or dams or some sort of storage ability over the winter months is going to be the way to go. And so some of these farms have already done that. So if you do see irrigation happening, it's not necessarily using the water source directly from the Koksilah, and just to kind of keep that in mind.
Right, right.
And I don't know if Doug or anybody else wants to add it there. I know that they're irrigating a field requires a certain amount of water to saturate the soil. I am not an irrigation expert by any means, but there is a science to it.
Yeah, I'm not the specialist on that. I do have some information I can relay if we want to get into the nitty gritty, but the Koksilah producers as a whole, they generally put a lot of money and effort into improving irrigation systems. So, a broad brush to say that there's lots of information out there to how to improve the irrigation systems. So that's still available. We have lots of fact sheets on I'll stick a link in there, and we have specialists that are more than happy to help anybody improve their systems, to be more efficient. But occasionally that happens. I know I've seen places where at the end of the pivot, that last little bit, it maybe spraying some water on the road or something like that, where it's just not feasible to the way the field is shaped or something like that. So sometimes that's in the public eye, but there's generally there's been a lot of investment in irrigation improvements in this area. But if anyone cares to have some information, I am totally available to pass on information for those.
Larry, your conversation sparked a few questions, so can I turn to you? Is Larry there? I guess when he starts speaking, I'll see him. Is Cowichan Tribes working to protect Cowichan people's cultural and traditional connection to the rivers, creeks, streams, and spring flowing through the ground?
I am here, Allison. Thank you. Thank you for the question. And again, it is good to see many of you I haven't seen for quite some time. And but to a special hello to our community members. It is good to see you. From the start, that has been one of our internal working groups that we have been working on to gather that information, to see how much of impact things are happening in this region, and what cultural components are very important to our membership. And that has been done mainly through one-on-one discussions with our community members. That is still ongoing. We definitely are open to have members put names forward of people that may have an interest in sharing information with us. So it is a priority from our side, and it is ongoing work, and it will continue be ongoing right till the end of the project. Thank you.
Here's another one there's a couple of them are in this topic area, so maybe we should talk about them now. Cowichan people have testimonial knowledge of when, where, and what types of food fish were harvested and gathered in the rivers, creeks, streams. Will this group utilize, this group I think meaning the Koksilah Watershed initiatives, will we utilize those testimonial voices to determine what was and what is in the watershed?
That has been one of the components of our questions that we've been having with our community members, you know, along with areas in other types of harvesting. It could be for medicinal or cultural practices, but definitely that is one of the main areas we are focusing on, is that salmon component. And yeah, and definitely we would love to have individuals come forward that we haven't spoken to and have discussions with them. It's one of the areas where we have more information than other areas, but if there's some new information on that, that would be so much appreciated.
And thank you, Larry. And my understanding, Tom, maybe you can help me here. This information is actively being integrated into the twinned watershed study on fish and flows, is it not?
Sure, thank you, Allison. So I think Larry's speaking to the water sustainability planning process, but I can speak to the technical work around flows. And there is like quite an innovative piece there where, aside from the Western science-based research that I talked about, we're also working closely with Candace Charlie and Tracy Fleming, and we're going through a process of interviewing knowledge holders and elders and gathering information from them about you know, flows associated with cultural practices and spiritual practices and, you know, food fishing, what they want to share with us. And the knowledge that we do get is going to be incorporated into the Western science piece. So it's quite an innovative piece of work that I think is precedent setting. And of course, very, very important to get that perspective as well. So it's a combination of Indigenous knowledge and traditional Western science. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Tom. Kelly, your turn.
Thanks, Allison. Just looking through these questions here. So if we don't manage to get to your question, we will keep track of the questions and provide responses. So don't fret if we don't manage to answer something you were eagerly awaiting. We may not know the answers to all these questions either off the top of our heads. Let's see. I was listening intently, Allison.
Actually, maybe while you think about which one, we could ask Jill, because there's an easy one here. When and how will recording of the meeting be available? And that's a Jill question.
Two things. One is that, as you all know, we are recording the meeting. If anybody would like to get that link, it's basically a link to an online recording, so you don't have to download it. You can just watch it. So I will put my email in the text box here. If anybody doesn't know it, it's just jill@cowichanwatershedboard.ca, and so I can circulate that starting tomorrow for anyone who wants to see that. And then the notes, it is a little bit tricky, I'll be honest, because we are a bunch of different groups here, as you all know. So where do things live is actually something that we struggle with a little bit, because we are not one organization. So the Watershed Board has a website, cowichanwatershedboard.ca, and I will certainly put it there. And it might be in other places as well, but I can't speak for other people's websites right now.
I'll certainly send them out to my list.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can send a follow-up email to everyone who submitted their email to register, and then we'll send all those links there.
Thanks, Jill.
Okay, I've got maybe a two-part question. It's two questions, but I'm going to ask them together. I might point to Tom, but there could be somebody else on this call that knows as well or better than he does. These are salmon questions. So one is, how far up the Koksilah does each species of salmon travel for efficient egg laying? And how significant are the drops in elevation of water levels at points up the river? And then the other part is related to temperature, and at what temperature is stress considered critical for salmon?
So I can take a stab at those, and then if there's someone at the call that knows more than I do, feel free to jump in. So the temperature piece for our salmon, once temperatures get into the high teens, so 18, 19, they experience stress. Once temperatures get into the mid-20s, those are lethal temperatures. And so what happens when the water starts to get that warm is the fish seek out cold water refugia. So there are microhabitats, thankfully, in most of our systems that have groundwater influence. And the groundwater is warmer in the winter and it's cooler in the summer. So what you'll see when the temperatures get really warm is you'll see large sort of congregations of fish at high densities in the cooler areas that you would not normally see. And of course, that's stressful as well, right? Because you get more predation and things like that going on. So that's kind of the temperature story. And it's why it's very important for us to learn about these cold water refugia and to make sure we protect them, because those are the areas that are keeping things going when we experience these really hot temperatures. With respect to species distribution, so different species of salmon are more or less able to navigate difficult barriers. So chum salmon basically spawn in the main stem in the lower end. For instance, coho salmon like to spawn in the tributaries. So there are like coho salmon in the main stem, certainly, but that's where streams like Kelvin and Glenora are really important, because the coho like to spawn in those little streams. And steelhead, which are an anadromous trout, are the strongest swimmers. So you'll find steelhead upstream of Burnt Bridge, for instance, way up there. For salmon, to the best of my knowledge, like Marble Falls is not a absolute barrier, but it's a partial barrier, and there's not a lot of utilization of salmon above Marble Falls. Now, that's my experience. Someone here might be able to correct me, because I know the people that live right on the river probably have a better view of this than I do. But the time I've spent on the river, that's been my observation, that the steelhead go way above Burnt Bridge and the salmon really thin out once you're at Marble Falls.
Thanks, Tom. I have a question about water and water use for Ben Robinson, and then a question about agricultural water use, maybe that Dave Tatum would have a good idea of. So the first question is there an estimate of how much water is currently being used by agriculture, as well as what they could take if they used all of their allotment?
Thanks, Alison. So yeah, there has been technical work carried out to do that on a parcel by parcel basis, using licensed volumes for those parcels and estimates where there is maybe groundwater use that's not licensed yet. There is a report available that was produced by a regional hydrogeologist and one of our water officers. It's on the KoksilaHwater.ca website. and it's, the name of it escapes me, but it's you know what, I could look it up and tell you what it is.
Here, Ben, it's called Water Use and Management in the Koksilah River Watershed, and it's under 2020 in the resources section of the koksilahwater.ca website.
Yeah, that would be a really good place to look that up. I think that answers the question.
So Dave, the question about agriculture is there is the ratio of farmers who have agreed to voluntarily partake in water restriction usage management program? What is the ratio? I'm not sure that's so as relevant as how many large users are participating. Maybe.
Oh, as far as large producers, well, I'd say it probably at least half anyway of the 18 producers or 19 producers. At least half, probably a few more. When we figured out how to come up with two different groups, we basically looked at licenses, and we actually contacted a few farmers to see how much they were pumping, because some of it's not licensed. Like some of the wells, we didn't know what their licenses were. And Wayne Haddo and a person from worked on it as well from FLNRORD to sort of come up and give me the numbers that I kind of needed. And basically I took the total of the numbers and divided it in half and looked at different, and just to come up with that sort of a ratio that was sort of utilizing half the water that was licensed or being used in that by each individual farm. And that's the only way I could sort of come up with it and try and come as close as I could. And that's how we divided up the farms into two teams, sort of thing. It's based on that. In some cases, we looked at acreage being irrigated, and reality is that most people want to put 12 inches of water on throughout the summer if you're growing forage. So we could kind of do a rough estimate of what their license would be like. I mean, we did the best we could with the information that we had. So to try and come up with a number for the licensee. We're just hoping that we're fairly close to breaking the volume in sort of half and dividing it up fairly enough that it'll maintain some flow in the Koksilah River. So that's
And Ben, maybe you could comment on the report that was done that showed that there wasn't an impact when they did do the scheduling last time.
Yeah, so that report's also available on the koksilahwater.ca website under 20. What is that? That's 2020 also. It's called the Koksilah Regulatory Response to Low Flows Effectiveness Analysis. But generally, the outcome of that report was that this is pertaining to the order rather than the irrigation schedule, but the order was most likely effective at raising river flows as well as groundwater levels. And it compares closely Koksilah River and Chemainus River, because they're usually very similar, but they diverge quite significantly during that period when the order was in effect. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. That report's available as well. Goes into more detail.
And Cali, over to you.
Thank you. So the question here that I think I'll ask Pat and or Larry. So and I think it's pertaining to the water sustainability planning. Says, can someone share how group is partnering with Cowichan tribes? Do they have an equal voice at the planning table? That may be, I'm not sure if that was referring to the drought working group or the planning process, but maybe we could speak to both.
Thanks, Cali. And maybe for the planning process portion, there is a working agreement with Cowichan tribes and the ministry. We're doing it on a government-to-government relationship, and it is still continuing to move. So we are moving to discussions on developing a memorandum of understanding. So there is a partnership, and it is it is a co-governance that we are currently using, the process we're using to move on this. We see it as a real partnership. Any other thoughts, Pat?
No, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think we recognize that the Koksilah Watershed is you know, Cowichan tribe's unceded territory, and we're honored to be part of, you know, looking for some solutions to some of the water issues. And you know, that being said, I think from a practical basis, the Cowichan Tribes organization is doing a lot of the heavy lifting with the administration and running the different projects. You know, they were the ones that got the Healthy Watersheds Initiative funding for the next, which is carrying the process along. So yeah, it's definitely a partnership, and we're excited. You know, I don't live in the watershed, but I'm, you know, thrilled to be part of this group.
All right, we have a question that's probably for, I don't know, maybe Cali or Ben or some water person. Since the logging, young tree profile and density of roads, the upper watershed is impacting the downstream water flows. And so what is being looked at in terms of supporting aquifer recharge technologies such as watershed level swales to support groundwater supplies?
Thanks, Allison. That's a lot to that question. So, I mean, we're still early on in this planning process, I think. And again, I'll refer to the koksilah.ca webpage. There was a preliminary and a feasibility study done this past spring 2020, looking at potential water supply options to supply water kind of not directly from the river during the low flow times to mitigate the impacts to low flows. So that is on the website. There was several options explored, very preliminary, and there wasn't one kind of clear solution, but I think through the water sustainability planning process and working with Ministry of Agriculture and really wherever funding can be obtained to do further work, we'll be taking steps to look at practical solutions to addressing the water supply concerns. So there is some good information in that report if you want to have a look. It's not specific to logging per se, but yeah, I think there's some good information in there, and we'll be working kind of from that going forward.
There's another forestry related one, which is, do we know yet what effect continued logging since the mid 1980s has had on the that's happened in the upper reaches of the Koksilah, what kind of an impact it's had on the watershed? And I would say we don't really know a lot about the forestry impacts in the Koksilah at this point, but maybe David Belzani, I'm going to get your name wrong. I do it every time. David, you're there, please answer.
Yeah, can you hear me? So just, you know, Pat and Larry addressed it at the beginning, the complexities of the watershed. And forestry, we have a lot to learn still, you know, in changing land use and climate and technology. And we are supporting the Koksilah Connections. We're on the Fish and Flows Working Group, and we do want to communicate all the good we're doing and how active forestry management can be part of that solution. So I think there'll be a bigger topic than I'm going to get to right now on that in the future, as Allison kind of pointed to. But again, pointing to the Koksilah Watershed website there, and that online hydrological analysis does address kind of the current age structure and says it's not really important to the cause of low flows right now, you know, that it's not statistically significant to the water balance. So we're not heavy users like the pulp mill. The trees are thirsty, but they're also sucking up carbon, so they need to be there as well. And it's that balance and mosaic we talk about of age and tree species and soil and experimental research in the watershed is important. So there's 150 paired watershed studies. This one is a Hatfield report. It is just one study, but it's an important one that they address the current age structure of the watershed. So I just ask people to refer to that because they did try and address forestry, but as Allison points out, we'll continue to work with the different users and through our MOU with the Cowichan tribes to share more information about what we're doing. So I'll just leave it at that if Pam has any more to add. But yeah, read that report.
Thank you. Kelly, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just scrolling through to see what questions we have left here. There's one here that I don't know who to direct it to. I am unaware of a log jam, but it says, is there a plan for the log jam between the Fritz property and the park boundary?
That is just right above Bright Angel Park. There's a large log jam that occurred this past winter. And I don't know who is responsible for looking at those types of things. Tom, do you know?
If it's a safety flooding issue, that is certainly one thing. I think the only comment I would have is, and I didn't mention it in my short talk, but one of the other things we've managed to do this year is to fly some really low-level, high-res orthophotography and to do some GIS mapping. So we're identifying things like that log jam and other opportunities for restoration or intervention. Right now, no one has the resources to do that, but what we now have is a tool that will allow us to really take a look in detail, like including LiDAR survey of what there is in the riparian area of the lower river, like from Marble Falls down. So we have a good tool that will allow whomever to actually plan and implement like works, whether it's flood control or habitat restoration or addressing a log jam. So I think that's what I can offer on that. I'm not aware of anybody that's planning to do that, but we have a tool that'll make things like that much easier.
Great. We're almost out of time. There's a couple of questions that relate to the local government, which I'll try and answer. One is, where is the CVRD drinking water and watershed function in all this? Why aren't they at this table? Well, the reason they're certainly invited to join our drought team and help out, but they are in the process of hiring someone to work on this watershed protection function. And so as soon as that person's hired, they'll be invited. It's a capacity issue at the moment. The other question, which is a little bit more complicated, is relates to the fact that someone moved here. Let me see, the Cowichan Valley has experienced drought for many years. There are many issues. We've talked a lot about them with respect to salmon and water restrictions and so forth. And if I had known of these issues, I would not have moved to the valley, but my internet search made no mention of them. Why are the local governments continuing to approve building permits at a furious rate, including commercial and residential permits, before working out the details and implementing water sustainability throughout the valley? The aquifer and mountain snow are no longer a sustainable water supply. So I can speak for the Cowichan Valley Regional District from the perspective of the electoral areas, which the Cowichan Station, Salmon, Glenora Area E is one of. We have undertaken this huge project to try to modernize our official community plans, and the official community plans are the policy document that drives the regulations around zoning and density and building and so forth. It's been a huge project because everything was very out of date, and we are putting everything under one umbrella and going through a modernization process. And it actually takes a couple of 2-3 years. The Koksilah is definitely on people's radar. I think what's most important at this point is that water licensing, if it is probably not possible to get a water license unless you have one already in the Koksilah. So new development for commercial reasons is pretty restricted from a water perspective. But I agree, we need to modernize our regulations to really deal with the development, because we shouldn't be developing. Every drop counts at this point, particularly until we get a plan in place and understand where we're going. Yeah, so that's my answer for that question. If your question didn't get answered, we will attempt to answer them or get back to you one way or the other. And I think we need to call it a wraps because it is 8:31 on my clock. So I really want to thank you for coming. And I want to thank Cali for co-chairing with me and helping. And I hope the evening has provided you with a really clear snapshot of the work that's underway. So, you know, there is lots to figure out before we can come up with a plan that will help us protect and manage water and the watershed as we move into a much more uncertain climate future. But I think we've made a really good start. And I also hope that you see as clearly as I do that we really need to change the way we think about the watershed and the way we live here. And we are definitely stronger when we all work together and everyone does their part. So my sincere gratitude goes out to the farmers who are working together to substantially reduce irrigation water use. And I thank all the residents who are investing in water storage and conservation technologies. And I'll put a plug in here for the Estuary Nature Center's drip irrigation workshop. If you haven't taken it, please do. Cisterns need to become the norm. Less development needs to become the norm. And I'd also like to thank property owners who are taking steps to protect and restore wetlands and riparian areas. That's a really important practical thing we can all do if we have land. So we will produce a meeting summary and we'll send it out to all our various contact lists and post it on the Cowichan Watershed Board website. And I really appreciate everyone coming, and thank you to all the presenters who did such a great job. And I hope we see you next year, and hopefully we'll see you sooner than that in the fall to talk about forestry impacts. So thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.